Hello and welcome to the Edtech podcast. This week, Ofsted Chairman David Hoare described my place of birth as a ghetto with problems of inbreeding, setting Twitter and the Isle of Wight Council alight with a spirit of indignation. For those wishing to investigate further, I recommend reading up on TES and checking out Savos Khan's humorous video on YouTube entitled On the Ghetto, replete with images of outstanding natural beauty on this holiday hotspot for sailors and non-sailors alike. In other news, this week's episode is with the JISC CEO, Paul Feldman.
There was no concept of using technology and learning. Technology and learning was an overhead projector.
JISC represents the UK further and higher education sector on Edtech standards and joint services. This episode was recorded on the day of the EU referendum, June the 23rd, 2016. In it, we talk about Janet, who increasingly sounds like a lovely and charming woman, but turns out to be JISC's 600 gigabyte backbone network for researchers and educators. We also talk about digital resources, distance learning, learning analytics, the UK standing internationally on open access and EdTech, student data privacy, and JISC's project to build an enormous warehouse of anonymised student data to better understand UK learning. 85 universities are signed up to date. Thanks for listening. Send your comments and questions to @podcastedtech on Twitter or the edtechpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to sign up to the free UKTI webinar on EdTech taking place this week at 10 a.m, this Wednesday the 10th. Registration is online and free, and you can find the link on Twitter and Instagram. Have a great week, everyone. I'm very delighted to be here with Paul Feldman, the CEO of JISC. And today is quite a momentous day as it's the day of the referendum, voting for remain or exit in the EU. And the weather is playing its part with a huge torrential downpour outside. So there's lots of sort of very wet people running around and looking quite harassed outside. But we're now in the calm domain of JISC. In, what's the name of the house here?
Brettenham House.
Brettenham House, so that's fantastic. So just before we get going, Paul, is it possible to give us a quick overview for those, we have listeners from all over the world who aren't familiar with JISC, what JISC is in a nutshell? Yeah,
so I think of JISC as the digital arm of the higher further education and research sectors. Our role, we connect all the universities and colleges in the UK, pretty much all the research institutes and a lot of other notable organisations like the British Library and the Science Museum and the like. And I see our role as providing solutions and capabilities and really sort of prompting the sector to use technology to improve the way they all work. I mean, we have an aim of the UK being the most advanced teaching and research nation in the world.
Wow. Okay. And I know I was listening to your the JISC podcast actually when I was taking a run the other morning, and I was listening about the JISC vision. So with your Connect events around the country. So what are the main visions that you're hoping to achieve for the sector, or the sector has informed you to deliver?
Well, I mean, they're multifaceted, and because the sector itself has got so many different aspects, whether it's a research-intensive university or a smaller Guild HE like the Royal College of Arts or something like that. They have different needs, as it were, but key to us is giving them the connectivity they need. So we run the Janet network that connects 18 million people a year, and the key need there is to provide the connectivity that the research industry need and universities need for teaching.
And so is that the kind of extended Wi-Fi network because my husband works in the university sector, and we were on a trip in Asturias recently, and we were just walking through a square, and he's like, "Oh, great, I'm on the network."
Yeah. No, that's Eduroam. So there's a worldwide sort of standard called Eduroam that we provide here in the UK. So all the universities, 96% of the universities, many colleges, and a few other institutions have the Eduroam standard. If you signed up for Eduroam, you can connect to it anywhere else in the world that happens to have an Eduroam Wi-Fi. So that's Eduroam. Janet is this massive network that sits across the UK. It's always hard to sort of describe its scale because it's enormous. And we're in the process of upgrading it. So if you think at home, here in the UK, there's 200 megabits. Is probably the maximum someone has as broadband. We've got 600 gigabits going into the backbone. The smallest main link is going to be 400 gigabits. And that's to supply the research needs, by and large, of the UK. Though we're finding of the teaching use of that's really growing, as well as universities and colleges start using a lot more online learning. But if you think of the amount of data that's coming out of the Hadron Collider in Switzerland, it's massive amounts of data. And we've got the Square Kilometre Array coming on stream soon that apparently has more data than all the rest of the research data put together that we've got to get from the source of the facility through to the universities and the research institutes that want to use it, and that's what Janet does. It means the universities just don't need to think about capacity. That's our problem. That's at the base layer, and then we provide a range of services on top of that. So we provide cybersecurity. We're part of we're one of the main collaborators in the Shibboleth consortium. So the ability to get a single sign-on to lots of educational resources. So we're along with a few other parties in the world, we're a key developer of that capability. We provide digital resources into the colleges and universities, so ebooks for further education. We digitized the English historic tests from I think 15th to the 19th century.
Wow. And
things like this in conjunction with the British Library, and it's an amazing amount of rich resources that we provide into the sector.
And are you finding there's a lot of interest internationally in sort of replicating that?
So yes, so we do a lot internationally, and we'd like to do an awful lot more as well. Actually, we've got some key services we provide into libraries at the moment that we've got a few people from around the world saying, "Oh, that looks interesting. Can you provide it for us?" So there's a couple of implementations. For example, there's Sweden take our service, and there's quite a few other countries at the moment sort of looking to do that. The network itself connects into JISC, which is the European. So there's networks in every country in the world, in all the main countries in the world, and JISC is the one that connects all the European, what's called NREN's National Research and Education networks, which is the equivalent of Janet. So we send traffic all around the world to help research collaboration. Lots of UK universities and colleges have offshore campuses, and they also have a lot of online learning, and we enable that and make it work effectively.
And in terms of, you mentioned obviously wanting to lead globally in terms of innovation and support for connectivity in higher education. Which countries or regions do you feel are sort of snapping at the heels or challenging that slightly?
So it's not just connectivity. We provide a lot of solutions as well, and there's because of the breadth of things that we do, it's hard to say this country is better or that country is better. I think actually in the network, Janet is probably the best in the world, we think, but it's certainly there or thereabouts, probably the biggest of its type in the world. So I think the UK definitely leads. It's a real jewel in the crown for the UK. Some of the things we're doing, learning analytics, the ability for universities and colleges to understand how their students are doing, how students can understand how they're doing and sort of make sure they're on track. The UK is catching up there. I think we'd say the US and Australia are probably leading in the use of analytics in the learning space, but we're looking to leapfrog the UK to be the best. I think in management of research data and open access and those type of capabilities, UK is probably there or thereabouts in the lead. Using technology in Edtech, using technology in further higher education, UK's got a long way to go. We think. I think Australia's an interesting country for that. I think there's a lot of interest in things happening in Germany and the Netherlands. The US, obviously, there are bright sparks there. But one of the things we're looking to do is to run a program in the UK to really push the UK to the forefront of that. But there's a lot of great practice in individual places in the UK, but as a nation, we've got an awful lot more we can do.
And so on your programme, what will that cover? What will be the main elements of that EdTech programme? Or
So we're in the process of scoping it up at the moment. We're doing a lot of research into what's good, and where there's opportunities. But it'll be things like learning spaces. What's best practice in learning spaces? It'll be things like what is the really best way to do online learning? What is the good way to it gets called blended learning and flipped classrooms. I don't think they're the best. We haven't come up with a great descriptor of how you really use technology in the moment in teaching, but something in that space. Really, what is the best way to get the concepts across online, and then how do you really sort of then play with them in seminars? How do the lecturers or teachers really sort of work with their students in that blend of technology and discussion? How can you bring people in virtually into real classrooms? I was talking to a university recently with an offshore campus where they want to be able to pipe in their offshore students into their onshore campus and run it as a virtual classroom. How do you do that? What's the best practice in that space?
And how do you think higher education and further education stack up against, say, K-12 or schools in terms of EdTech and the cultural acceptance of innovation in that way, and challenge, perhaps where you have establishments that are hundreds of years old and very proud of that? Do you think that's part of the uptake challenge?
Absolutely. I think schools partly because I think there's more interesting EdTech in schools. It's a much bigger market, and there's a lot more scope for innovation in schools. It's also a much bigger age range. So we don't serve the schools, so I don't have a great insight into what's happening there. But my sense is there's a lot more innovation in the school space. There are some really great examples of innovation in technology in colleges. There are some examples in universities, but on the scale of things, less so. So I think there is a real opportunity to do an awful lot more, and there are different challenges. So further education, there's a lot less money. There's less,
quite a lot of consolidation happening at the moment.
Absolutely. So when you look at the providers wanting to who look at the market, they'll say, well, is there the scale there? And I think higher education, it's much more bespoke. I mean, every lecturer has their own way of bringing over their ideas, and it's as much around the lecturer as it is around the material. So again, it's ripe. There's real opportunities, and I think the 100-year-old establishments, that they bring their own kudos. They bring their own magic that people go for.
Because you mentioned people bringing their students into physical lecture spaces in the UK, perhaps where they have satellite institutions. How do you see a university perhaps in the year 2050? Is it going to be a physical space, or is it going to be something different? I mean, have you I know a lot of what JISC do is sort of the horizon gazing aspect. So how do you see universities looking that far in the future?
Well, I mean, we believe that a key part of the university experience is not just the pedagogy. It's the whole social experience. It's the growing up. It's the meeting friends for the rest of your life. And I think there will always be that demand to move away from home and be in a safe, exciting space where you learn. It's that bridge from school into the rest of your life. So I believe there will always be physical universities. I also think that no matter what comes, that really face-to-face next physical experience in learning, it can't be. It's been a long time, even in 2050. I don't think it'll be replicated online. So I think there's always going to be a place for that face-to-face experience. That's not to say you're not going to get great experiences online and distance learning, but sort of being able to touch and feel research, being able to see the whites of the eyes of the lecturer, that sort of the excitement of being next to someone who's getting a learning, a real sort of insight into something is irreplaceable. But so I think the spectrum of learning is always going to be there.
And how was your own education experience? And what was my understanding is you came into JISC, in the last couple of years?
Yeah, October.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and joining JISC and what your background was and that kind of thing?
Well, so I mean, I graduated in 1981, so I graduated in the world where there was no concept of using technology and learning. Technology and learning was an overhead projector. And scribbling, absolutely, and scribbling down notes, even though I did a computing degree. Oh, wow. So I did my first degree at St Andrews in computing, did a bit of work when I did my PhD, again, pretty much in business it was, but the computing aspect of business. And I've worked pretty much in the commercial space, most of the time, a lot of that in banking. Joined here last October, it's been a fascinating insight into education. So my experience of education, other than my own education and my kids, who I've got two daughters who have been through university now. Actually, one's just about to go back, but until last October, I hadn't really been involved in the business of the universities and colleges. So my learning curve is immense. Really enjoying it and really seeing the difference that we can bring. One of the benefits I bring into the sector is I've been involved in innovation in banking. I've been involved in innovation in digital publishing, and I can bring those insights into the sector and really push. I suppose I can bring a confidence in that innovation does make a difference in sectors that have already been through the digital revolution. Yeah. To help the to help the sectors we serve really sort of move forward.
So one of my questions was around the role of JISC in terms of helping to offer universities efficiencies in terms of procurement. Mm-hmm. So, for example, working with the vendor community, I suppose, to develop products that, really aid, whether it's universities or further education, B, then, making that process one that isn't as expensive as it needs to be, but at the same time is tailored to each university or further education college's needs. Because I suppose there could be a temptation to buy something that's standardised across everything, but then universities differ in their wants and needs. What are your thoughts on all of those questions there?
So, a key part of what we do, as you've said, is to procure on behalf of the sector where it makes sense to procure on behalf of the sector. And it is a balance. Everything you said is right. There's a balance between getting something that is of value to the sector while also ensuring that there's flexibility. And I think some of that defines where we can successfully buy. So we've done a lot of technology deals. We've got deals with Microsoft, Amazon and Google to enable colleges and universities to get access to the cloud, Office 365, Google Apps for education in a really effective way. And because of the network, we connect in directly, so we make it effective technically as well as buying. We have JISC collections, which is the way that the sector buys journals, e-journals and e-books. So we bring together all of that need from the whole of the sector, and we'll negotiate with the publishers, not only to get good deals, but to get them structured in the way that the sector works, particularly with the open access agenda that's around. What we don't do is go out and tailor the products too much. We do where it makes sense. If they're not educational products, but we think we can bring them in, we will have those conversations. We'll make them fit for purpose for education, but for the broad mass. Our view is that it's we'll put the contracts in place, but it's for the universities and colleges to take that and really make it work for themselves. That's their job, and we enable them. We'll sometimes stimulate them to do different things, but it's their job. It's the CIOs in the universities and colleges who need to take that and really make it work for them. It's librarians to take the capabilities and really make it work for their institutions.
And I mean, you mentioned publishers before and JISC collections. Are you seeing a lot of, you talked about disruption in banking and publishing, disruption to that with regards to things like Google Scholar, and is that changing, or will journals be a kind of mainstay, do you think?
It's really fascinating, and that's a hard one to predict. The publishers are doing their absolute best to maintain their revenues, as they should, because we need the publishers to be vibrant organisations. But there is plenty of opportunity for them to adapt to the digital world. I think we truly believe that the world of the future will be very different. And when we speak to the publishers, they all recognise that there's an adaptation to happen. But it's got to happen in the right way for them. We don't want to see them fall over and go bust.
No.
So it's how they can change their models, their economic models for that world of the future, and still deliver the value they do to our members, universities and colleges.
You mentioned learning analytics within JISC. I suppose they're sort of negotiating the analytics, adaptive learning agenda as well, and sort of going through that process, aren't they? So.
Though that's less publishers and more. I mean, if you take that's a great example of where we've worked closely with a lot of suppliers to fit into the open standards that we've defined. And maybe open's a bit of an overblown word there, but we've defined a framework and a set of standards that the UK can adopt to really start collecting those learning moments and use the capabilities of the suppliers. Are also adapting for the UK to be able to sort of move forward. So it's really collaborative between the vendors, the universities, colleges, and ourselves to create a different ecosystem, unique in the world, that we think will really lead the way.
Part of that, as I understand it with JISC, is sort of flagging at-risk students and that kind of thing. And obviously with, I think, debt in the US associated with student dropouts, 1.2 trillion or something. I heard a absolutely massive figure. But is that kind of a pressure point and a fear of the establishments here about, we need to kind of make sure we don't go down that path? Or
I think it's similar, but I think the issue in the UK is, and where some of it's coming from, is about widening participation. So how do we get a broader range of people feeling confident about getting access into higher education, particularly universities, for widening participation? Because I think colleges do pretty well in that space. But how do we get a broader range of people coming into university? And then when they're there, how do we make sure they're successful? And I think that learning analytics is definitely a key tool in ensuring the success of students from if they're the first into university. They don't have parents who understand to help them, guide them through the trials and tribulations, because university isn't an easy experience. And then some universities are using it to get students through who are maybe on the borderline of a 2-2 into a 2-1 or a 2-1 into a first. So it can be used in multiple ways.
So one of the questions we had from our listeners was, will JISC be going into the MOOC market to improve CPD?
That's not our bit. We're not in the business of pedagogy. We're in the business of enabling a pedagogy. So definitely, a lot of the MOOCs, in fact, almost all the UK MOOCs providers will have us at some part of their infrastructure. So we're definitely an enabler. Our technology-enabled learning program, which is a bit of a mouthful. We've got to find a better name for it.
Make an acronym. Everyone loves acronyms.
The acronym's TEL, but nobody knows what that means at the moment. So our TEL program is definitely we'll look at things like MOOCs and see how we can help the institutions to be more effective. We're not and never will be a MOOCs provider. We are in the CPD market for lecturers, understanding how they can do more effective learning using technology. So we've developed a range of digital skills programs for leaders in colleges and universities to help improve their skills.
So what kind of role within a university would be the person that would attend that course?
So lecturers might get value from it. Certainly, leaders of universities will get value from it. There's a couple of different courses and options. We've even got some that for students as well. So there's 3 or 4 different solutions that we've put in place there, all of which are in pilot or in early stage. So there's a lot of change to go in that space.
And is cautiousness around data protection still a huge issue for universities?
Well, there's certainly, quite rightly, a continual focus on protecting data, and that should never go away. We've worked really closely with the National Union of Students here in the UK to work out a code of ethics for use of data, and our learning analytics program really adheres to that, and we're providing good protection within our solution for the individual student data. That data is only available to the student or broadly for the institution. It's the institution's data, it's the student's data. It's not our data. We have it in our warehouse, but we protect it as best we can in that space. We can see, because we're going to build this enormous and unique and quite fantastic warehouse of learning, UK learning, that's going to be extraordinarily useful for researchers in teaching as it builds up. But for that, we'll have to anonymise it. We will be anonymising it because we have to protect the individual student records.
And so that's warehouse. Could you remind me what it was called again? The UK.
I'm not. It has. It's not got a name yet. It will have a name.
So what is that?
So if we come back to our learning analytics program, what that'll be doing is capturing all the digital footprints that students leave as they go through their learning journey. As they attend lectures, as they go to the library, as they read ebooks, as they put in assignments, and so on. So all of that data is uploaded into our warehouse by the university or the college, and then we run heuristics against it. And so we've got at the moment 85 universities signed up for moving into this. So over the next two or 3 years, all of that data and more, we expect. We would hope that by the time we're done, most of the UK universities and many colleges will be signed up for this. So we're building up all of these individual records into this massive big data warehouse, and we'll be able to run all sorts of interesting analytics against it for general trends in educational practice.
And will you
in the
be
UK.
publishing those trends for the wider community, or will that be something specific for your members? Or
Well, our members are all the universities and colleges, so every single one of those is a member of JISC. But that's where we have to take care with it. So there were people with valid research who we would hope to make the warehouse available for. But I think we have to take great care not to people have given us the data in trust. We need to respect the trust that it's given to us and use it with caution. We're really excited by what this will be. As I say, it's a real competitive advantage for the UK as we build it up, and we think it's going to give rise to some really interesting capabilities as it matures. So the more we think about it, the more we think of the things that we'll be able to enable for the UK. But it's all a bit too early. There's still a lot of visioning and dreams. But if you but there's anybody thinking about what that might look like can imagine some of the opportunities that we're starry-eyed about.
And if people have ideas or thoughts about how they could or how JISC could use that, can they contact JISC and with their
absolutely.
ideas? Is there a collaborative process on that front?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly from the universities and colleges that sign up, there's a whole program of involvement. I think there's quarterly meetings and lots of interaction. I'm sure there's lots of social media that I don't subscribe to that people can subscribe to and sign up.
So what was I going to say? And on that front, in terms of the tracking and the harvesting of that data, for want of a better word, is that done through universities' sort of VLEs or learning management systems, that kind of thing? So,
for example, yes.
Yeah.
So they're library students, they're student information systems,
yeah,
they're VLEs, they're just all the various sensors that are around in universities. So there's multiple different sources, and that comes back to the vendor collaboration, because all of those have vendors, and we've worked with those vendors, the vendors that want to take part, and there's many of them, to sort of define the standards so that we can sock the data into our warehouse in as effective a way as possible.
And so when does that project kicking off, or
it's a live project. We're in pilot in a number of institutions. As we speak, I think we've got 10 institutions already uploaded data into the warehouse, and that's growing every day.
Excellent. So what does the following week hold for you?
So if I look at what's coming up in the near future, we've got the JISC board meeting next week. So we're a not-for-profit. We've got a board of trustees. They're coming down to our Bristol office next week. I think it's their first visit into the Bristol office. So it's a bit of a tour of the Bristol office, obviously the standard business of the board. It's quite interesting, on Wednesday, I've got a student from St Andrews who's shadowing me.
Oh, cool. So your old university?
Yeah, my old university. They've got a program they've developed to try and get alumni to actually sort of give a leg up, as it were, just in terms of experience. To students. So you're
going to have loads of cups of tea that day.
Absolutely. So she's got quite a good day ahead of her. So she's going to see the board meeting, and then and then she's coming back to London with me to attend a dinner so I'm not exactly sure what the final attendee is list at that, but it's an organisation called HEPI, the Higher Education Policy Institute, dinner on so she's going to get quite a good experience. The following week I'm off to we've got a conference, a worldwide conference on learning, so I get a lot of high-profile speakers coming in from around the world to talk about. I think it's the use of information in research that we're sponsoring jointly with the US CNI, Connected Network Institute. I don't know what CNI stands for. So
another acronym.
But another acronym. But I do know, but I can't remember at the moment. So that's so we got that conference, and then I've got to fly off to Vancouver in the middle of the conference to meet with peer CEOs from the other network, the NRENs, the National Research and Education Networks. That's not my usual week, but there is no such thing as a usual week. And
how do you unwind? What's your own kind of way of unwinding from all of this?
So I play golf. So I play golf every fortnight. We do a lot of walking, my wife and I. So we'll get out walking most weekends, and we do a lot of that down in Pembrokeshire, which we love. I eat too much. We do a lot of cinema, read a lot, and when I can, I go mountain biking.
Oh, cool. I used to do a lot of mountain biking. Well, Paul, thank you very much. And if people want to contact JISC, they can. I know you guys have your podcast. You're on Twitter. I'm not sure if you're on Instagram. They can contact you in those ways. And
absolutely, and the website's there, so you can find all the ways to contact us on the website. And if you're in education or higher and further education in the UK, every college and university has key contacts. They have account managers. We have Connect More events going on around the UK at the moment. So there's regional events that people can use their once a year regional events. We have our DigiFest conference people can come along to annually. Lots of ways to get involved.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks very much, and head back out into the rain now.
Good luck.
Thanks very much for listening, everyone. If you feel like subscribing, sharing the podcast with a friend, or rating the podcast, you can do so at iTunes, TuneIn or Stitcher. And next week we are back with Richard Kalata, the Chief Innovation Officer from the state of Rhode Island. See you then.